Okay,
We're
we're back.
Okay,
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of rewind a little bit and just say this memo was written, we were very disappointed last year with the quality of the testimony that we were receiving from the administration when it came to, and part of that came from the lack of experience of knowing what to ask or how any particular agency worked or how they all worked. And so during the off session, the chair worked on this memorandum with a couple of different people just to sort of give the administration advance notice of how we wanted these, especially these introductory budget meetings to go. Many of us who wouldn't have known what questions to ask. When I started on this committee a year ago, I didn't know what ag dev meant. It was just another one of those phrases, and of course, we found out yesterday that the financial management people, they call the budget and management section Budman. So there's all these little weird things that go on with acronyms or with short names. And for those of us who were unaware of a lot of the stuff, there was a lot of baffling with information that we didn't know whether we needed it or not. And the conversation was only about ups and downs, which is, asking for more money or giving money back. And it didn't have anything to do with the accountability of whether that organization was functioning the way that we perhaps intended it to. So the chair took time to come up. Now, John, I'm not sure if were you here for results-based accountability? Was that a thing when you first got here?
I think so.
No. So over time here, we've had several different ways of trying to create an atmosphere of accountability, and results-based accountability is a fairly national way of trying to determine how organizations are working. And this has some elements of that. It's not called that, but it has this idea of what do we want to do? How much money does it cost? Are we actually helping people? And that's kind of a really paraphrased way of thinking about how to ask the questions and how to try to find some accountability with the administration or anybody who comes in and say, we appropriate this money to you. We approve these policy changes to you. Did they help? And who did they help? And was it essentially cost effective? So the expected outcomes here is all that phrase expected outcomes is also an older phrase from an older way of trying to deal with this accountability. What are the expected outcomes? And so they've put this together in a way that the chair put this together with the bullet point saying support effective informed budget decision making, enhance budget submission usefulness and responsiveness, and ensure appropriators receive the information they need. This was specifically sent to administration officials for that reason. But it goes hand in hand with the policy committees, because one of the things that happens, and it did happen last year, not in a terribly offensive way, but it did happen where, because we had a bunch of new people, we were curious. And so we would ask a lot of questions that would really edge into deeper policy conversations that it's not that we weren't supposed to be privy to it, but because of the curiosity and because of the communication problems that we have between committees. I mean, we only get to see your bill when you're finished with it, and then it goes off into this never land, and we all just as policy people go, oh, what's going to happen? And this is an attempt to say, well, if you come in and are able to communicate to us on a deeper level, then we won't be spending time asking those same questions. I mean, we'll still be curious, but it's just an attempt to try to improve that communication between committees as well. John?
So Tom, is Approbes then creating the kind of metric that you just talked about that you'll be able to judge, or is it you're using like some national standard?
This document, if you read it, will give you an idea of what we sent. It will tell you exactly what we sent to each of the departments. So page 2, preparing before testimony. We want to know what the current year and prior year budget documents are. We want to know what the agency, how are the baseline understanding of the agency or department websites and the legislative reports that they're supposed to issue. Questions to consider before testimony. So again, they've received this as they were working on their budgets. As an example of what happened so far this week, AHS came in. AHS has 5 divisions. It's what, 30% of our budget, right? So it's a big deal. But like us here, where we all work in our silos, even those organizations work in silos until it kind of comes up to the top. And they reported yesterday, and again, not giving, I'm not going to judge their testimony in as a whole, but just roughly, they all testified that sitting together in a room, all the different divisions to start working on their budgets and their policy goals was really helpful, and they had never done it before. So so they were able to provide a more united face talking about the larger AHS budget. And now they're still coming in on their individual silos to come in and talk about it. But at least they know, for instance, someone may get picked up and they need help from the state from AHS. Well, did they get picked up for drugs, or did they get picked up for a mental health issue? Because if they got picked up for a mental health issue and you called the wrong division, they'd say, well, that's not us, that's mental health. And, we all kind of know that drugs and mental health they kind of work together. And so they began to identify in their testimony, they began to identify that this was helpful because they were able to say, oh, maybe we shouldn't just close off that phone call and shoot somebody someplace else and have them start the runaround. We'll see how it works, but at least they got the idea of what it can do for their division, and then how they report it back to us. So the questions to consider: understand the mission of the agency. What does it do? Why does it exist? Look for context and comparison. Does this, other states do the same things we do? How are they handling it? And then for us, this was really important. Use testimony time strategically. Sometimes we feel like the strategic part of their testimony is to run out the clock. We want something different. So we want to just, in this case, focus discussion on information needed to evaluate budget requests, besides just ups and downs. But that can include us trying to understand all of the factors that go into their budget request. And some of them are most of them are about, it just has to happen. We have to have increases in salaries and increases in benefits. And then you get the more squirrely things like our computer systems need more money and, stuff like that we know is cyclical. And yet we still can't seem to get testimony that says we instituted a new ADS system and it worked great in a short amount of time even. And so we're trying to monitor their testimony from time to time that they come in. They are also, of course, presenting the administration's priorities, not necessarily ours, but it's important for us in that office, in that committee, to understand what their priorities are as well, because we know that there will be tensions. And clarify the problem first. Agencies may jump straight to solutions. Don't hesitate to ask, what's the underlying problem? How did the problem arise? What happens if nothing is done? Other useful framing questions: what are consequences of the action? What are the consequences of inaction? So we're trying to, is this bill really necessary? Is kind of it's something we should all be asking. Is this bill really necessary? And we'll be asking that of the departments as well. So focusing on core budget fundamentals, the request should clearly address what problem is being addressed, what's happening. Are there negative outcomes occurring now? What evidence exists about current conditions? Are federal requirements involved? And then evaluating the proposed solution. Will a budget change improve the situation? What happens if status quo is maintained, and how would this be administered? How would you use existing resources? And I think this is the kind of stuff that your committee, a policy committee, should be asking, because we're going to see in Ag Dev, we're going to see, Working Lands is going to ask for what they asked for last year, which is $5 million, and they got baselined at $1 million, just like last year. And so there's going to be a conversation: is there even money available? And how would we manage? And that's the conversation between your committee and our committee. And what other tangential committees where people would see, is it important for the Human Services Committee to know that there will be more food available through the food banks? are they going to be able to chime in and say, this is a good thing to do? Exploring the alternatives, what other solutions may exist, compare the trade-offs, the pro and cons, short-term versus long-term impacts. These are all questions that we'll ask, you know, because one of the issues with state government is, and some people on our committee have asked us, and I've learned not to, which is just to say, will this solve the problem? How do you define success? And, you know, how do you define success for any of our programs? We go year to year. How do you deal with long-term situations when agency heads move and, you know, certain employees are there for a long time, but agency heads might move around and may have different priorities 2 years from now than the people setting them now. It's the juggling act that we all deal with. And that's something that we have to ask, you know, is it reasonable to, you know, if you invest more money in working lands this year, does it mean you expect that much more next year? Or will it help next year? Or can you do this once every 3 years where they get a, you know, it's all these questions that should be asked. And then the last thing we ask them to do is to be prepared. It's just to, you know, the worst question or the worst answer someone can give is, we'll get back to you. And when they say that to us, I think the chair's goal is to, okay, you can come back in next Wednesday, you know, and give them a time certain, because that's usually an answer that is meant to be defensive and deflective. And so, start with the problem and not the solution, which is, it's just something that they, you know, if you want to ask for more money, then tell us why, really. And then don't say money will be the solution, because that's sometimes true and sometimes not. So that is what we asked of them. And I think what the chair asked me to just explain it this way is just so that you all know that when your departments, no matter how friendly we are or non-antagonistic we are to any particular committee or agency or division of that, is to say, in this year's world, where the Speaker of the House has said, don't expect new money, but how can you not, is the policy committees, I mean, you're going to fight like hell for what is most important to this committee. I mean, every committee is, and they should be. And then you need to come to us, leadership, and build the same kind of momentum that advocates are doing to come into you to ask for money. And then, you know, and then together, hopefully we all sort it out. You know, it's not, I personally have a hard time with going, you know, oh, here's $1 million and there's 12 requests. Who gets what? But that's a certain reality. And so the idea of, you know, we were able to put $400,000 into the Vermonters Feeding Vermonters program. And a lot of that came from the fact that there were enough of us on the committee that were like, and not just one party, but, you know, we know the benefit of that program, even in its first year. And we were able to find, some of our opinion, not enough, but we're in an austerity budgeting session. So anything more than what we originally, I mean, the ask was 1.5. The original placement was 250,000. Again, when you're in an austerity budgeting world, everybody will go, oh, that's great. Better than nothing. It's like, yeah, it is. But also the problems that are being defined are much higher than that. And so we were able to get an extra $150,000, and they're just the way other funds sugared off. And so, I mean, I'm not going to say that I'm going to say no matter how much you prepare and how worthy the program is, it's still going to be very hard to fund a lot of things this year. And so that's just being honest, straightforward. And there's more than just me who argue for agricultural and food and resiliency programs in the committee. And so, you know, above and beyond the, you know, more philosophical questions about what to do with $105 million of surplus funds, we all have our personal desires to, you know, whether it's to pay down property taxes again, which then creates the hole again. I mean, 50% of the 12% increase is due to what we did last year. At what point do we stop that? That's not just for us to decide. That's a big decision. But some of us would say, well, why can't I take $5 million and fund what these people need, the people need? And that's not, we all say that and we all feel that way, and how we get there.
We've got a couple of questions here, but let me say officially, formally, thank you for advocating for that $400,000, and we were very happy to hear that. And that, I think BA is on the floor today. Right?
Today, yeah.
Will they actually voting that out?
Maybe.
Yeah. Because Governor Douglas is here, and God knows we need to see his class and thank him for bringing them in again, because it's always like an annual thing, that just seeing them come over from Middlebury. Yeah.
John.
Since we can't be in two committees at once, I mean, way I understand it, oftentimes if we take something like Working Lands or Vermonters Feeding Vermonters or Prop Cash Plus, those asks come here and they also are presented to you, approach, I mean by that. And so you know about them. It's not like, oh, they went through the policy committee and now, we're seeing sort of what they say. So at approach, what would you like us to do as far as prioritize them, or like the letter we sent about Vermonters Feeding Vermonters? What helps approach as far as this account space?
I think part of it, is David's job is going to be working with leadership to determine a little bit, not so much, leadership isn't going to say this much is available, but they may be told, pick one, right? Pick a priority. And that's up to you guys to decide what the priority is. I mean, when I was at House General and we had such a broad portfolio, that appropriations was so pissed that we would give them 12 priorities because we had 12 subject matters to deal with. I think seeing what's in the budget first, seeing what agriculture and what the agency puts forward, specifically in ag dev, because that's state money. A lot of the federal, finding out what money they may have received. Did they use it? Is it being, the $30 million that they were waiting for? Is it going to get used, and how it's going to get used? That's all important from accountability. But in terms of funding what your wishes might be, seeing what the administration allowed the agricultural agency to put into, and I know it's got a longer name, just shorthanding it. It's understanding what they put down, and then it's up to you to decide and to talk to the advocates, and advocates are going to talk to us. They already have started. That's part of our game. That's part of our process. But from your perspective, don't just leave it once it leaves this committee. Talk to the people on the committee, and make it, if it's a moral issue or whatever it is for you, make it hard for us to say no. But understand that even no matter what we do, then it goes to the floor, then it goes to the Senate, and then, the BAA was vetoed twice last year. We put our, both the House and the Senate put their plan out on the table, and it was vetoed 2 times. So that can happen again. But I think we're always in between of well, what do we think will pass? And I think if I tried to think what you think, I'm going to lose because I have no idea. And so we just have to really focus on the priorities. And if there's places that, again, think austerity, before COVID, we lived a life of, wow, we got $50,000. It's awesome. And it was usually a win. So I just, there's no promises, but because we're going to hear from everybody in our heartstrings and in our ability to look at the bigger budget as a whole. And, but essentially at some point, somebody's going to say, somebody above my pay grade is going to say, this is the box we're working in. And people are gonna have to say, you know, whatever you say when you can't fund somebody to the level that they need it. And that's different than saying to people, what do you want? I want $5 million. What will you settle for? Or what do you want? What do you think you really need? And then what will you settle for? And what will you not settle for? Because sometimes it's like, if I don't get enough money, I can't start the program. I'm going to make your 1.0 job be a 1.2 job. And that's as bad as not having it in some conditions. So it really is advocacy. You're going to have to advocate for the programs that you feel are important. And then, we'll end up having to sift out, because to me, it's like, they're all important. It's not like our job is to score them somehow. But if you come to me about a logging issue that's important to 50 loggers in the Northeast Kingdom or something, that's really important to you. And it's really important to those people. Is it any less important than, a farm in Richmond that gets flooded all the time? It's really.
So I know you probably are the right person to respond to that, Chad, but let me turn to Richard, because I think he had asked a question earlier.
Yeah.
Question.
No, my favorite bills are the ones that are de minimis to money. Then it's all about policy and setting up rules or law statute that makes life work better, in agriculture or forestry. The food resiliency, a lot of that is about money and helping people that are deserving. Are you suggesting that if Crop Cash Plus comes in and asks for, what did they ask for last year? 2 million?
No.
500,000.
500,000. Thank you. I'm confusing it with food bank. They come in and ask for 500,000 and we're building up the state, like the pile of ass that we work through that here and maybe pare some of those back to send them to you. Or I think our philosophy has been send them to you and then let you folks decide how they score.
I think that there's an argument to be made that other people, not me, would adhere to, which is to, please do the work for us. But my experience shows that if you don't ask for what you think you need, we're just going to cut it anyway. So if you go from 500,000, you say, well, maybe we should only ask for $250,000. You can be sure that it's not going to be more than $150,000, just the way these things work. And that I would expect that. So I would always advise people who are advocating to start at the top. And then the chair is going to, do you really need this? And it's like, and that's why they get paid the little bucks. And, it's just.
Yeah. No, thank you for that.
Yeah, I wouldn't make the decision between your committee, our committee, the floor of the House, and the Senate committees in the Senate. We'll make a lot of those decisions just in the course of doing business. And seeing it, I'm glad we could get it up to $400,000. We'll get that across today in the House. I don't know what will happen in the Senate, because they'll take a look at what we did and they'll either rarely accept it or they'll put their own spin on it. And that's just something you may end up with, the program may end up with more, it may end up with less. And then that's what the conference committee is about. And then if we all didn't do it the way that the executive branch wants it done, then, he can veto it.
Let's get a couple more questions in before we let Tom go. Yeah, Greg.
Thank you, Chair. Tom, I very much appreciate what you're doing with teaming up the testimony and that document. It looks to me like that's just tailored to your committee, or is that something you're looking to have for all committees?
This was shared, I think, with every committee. So you can look at it, pull from it what is appropriate for you. I mean, it was directed from our committee to administration agencies, so you can pull what's appropriate for you. Because you can grill, you don't have to wait for us to grill the agency on whether they think these programs are worth their while, that they're, how affected were they by federal Michigas, you can use the elements here that are universal enough to ask the questions you need. Because I mean, in the end, our job is to know, one of the issues when there's a lot of turnover is that a lot of experience goes away. And as you're learning how to not only how to do the job, it's like who else is doing it and how are we working with them? Because it's really easy to sit across the table from a human being and they're saying, we're doing great. And you kind of want to go, ask a different question. And sometimes we don't. And this should give you this should give you an idea of how to do it with, in a professional way it's not antagonistic.
And that's sort of not antagonistic, because I mean, I feel like this committee is known for being a committee that other people want to be on if they want it to be a more amicable atmosphere. And so we also, I think I struggle because I don't want them to come across as grilling necessarily, but wanting to make sure there's accountability, as you spoke to, and
Yeah.
I've been kind of left in want at times in that arena. And
From a personal perspective, I like to ask questions. I was on a policy committee for 16 years. So, and when you have a name in your committee called general, you get anything comes in. And I was able to ask questions from people that I wouldn't normally talk to, but also to ask people come in with a script in their head. I'm only being asked about this. And this is trying to kind of shift that a little bit, because sometimes when you ask questions that are unexpected, not antagonistic, but unexpected, if somebody says something about a dairy operation and you have a knowledge that doesn't necessarily jibe with that, or that you have like, let me ask the next question because you do have the knowledge of it that I wouldn't ask. Sometimes you get really good answers. Sometimes you get the questions answered. Sometimes you open up a whole new avenue, which can set a bill back a few days for sure. But it is that's what you want, is the information in order to make, I mean, I don't like being rubber stamp what people ask. I don't care who they are. I want to make sure that I'm comfortable, especially in the committee work, that I have the focus on, that I'm voting in a way that's satisfies my curiosity.
We're typically thinking about the budget in terms of the base and one-time appropriations, and that's one way that we think about it. And I believe that we're not supposed to just be thinking about one-time appropriations here necessarily, but the items that have become base and perhaps in previous years, we haven't spent a lot of time thinking about them because they're in the base. We don't need to worry about that. But that's where most of the budget actually is. So we should be.
And not just along with that, it's like, is this program still necessary? And the answer may be yes, and that may be satisfactory. Is it enough? Understanding in this agency, what can you even talk about with base if so much of it is federal? And then, because they're talking about two different things, and how much do you need to know about what's going on with the federal thing, except as how it balances off anything, federal matches, local matches, all that stuff. But yeah, it gets down to how much grant money is available? Vermonters feeding Vermonters, the difference between the literature that was shared with me in the last 3 weeks, it's like the difference between being able to help 50 businesses or 150 businesses, what would that mean for the communities? So those should, they are the administration. So they're not going to stray too far from what the administration is looking for, but they're human and they're going to answer questions because they do want it to be a little bit, and nobody wants to be in an antagonistic Q&A. So.
One more, Chet.
Thank you, Chair. And this is the opposite of antagonistic, but about 20 minutes ago, when you referred to the committee as the Agriculture and Food Resiliency Committee, we're incredibly inclusive and we have some broad responsibilities. So forestry is one of them. But we have a strong consensus about, feeding Vermonters, particularly those in need, like food bank and, bridges to health and Vermonters feeding Vermonters. But we also in the FPR have a lot of responsibility for climate resilience and water quality protection. So we do have asks, some made for generally in this committee, more consensus. We prioritize them. I think we mostly lean for the food and those more in need. But there are some other diverse, lower priorities, but equally important from a committee responsibility. So would you suggest that if there were in all three segments asks, they should be prioritized by what we present to you, or just included in that ask?
I think it's included, but also if you're teaming with the Environment Committee on climate related priorities or what have you, I mean, you guys, when you work on a farm, you're there, right? You can see it from year to year and you can know whether it's a year to year thing or whether there's fundamental changes going on in the world around you. I mean, so why not work with the Environment Committee to, even if it's not a drive, even if it's a drive-by or if it's just an understanding of, so that they know that this committee works on climate,
Well, it's part of forestry, it's part of farming.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, I know. I love how this committee has grown and become broader. And I mean, you brought forestry into it because of your interest, but I think that's important, and it reflects. I mean, you can go back into the history books and look at all the different committees that ever existed, and not only wonder where they went, but it's like, yeah, I used to have an aviation committee, and there's like, or it was part of a different committee, and you're kind of like, why was that? Because we didn't have that many airports, and it was there was a lot of things, but it existed.
And I also thank you for, as we all appreciate, the clarity and focus. So it helps you and it also helps us.
And can I take a minute and just to, if anybody has a question about why we changed we took the word climate out of S60. The main reason was that we first talked about it in December when there was a lot of chatter about the way that the administration in Washington was attacking everything, not anything, everything related to climate. And it just came up in conversation, even though it was only in findings of did we want to, because anything, I mean, if you get letters from around the country from people saying, I saw that you sponsored this bill, that it's out there and that people have search engines on for anything. And I have to imagine they do too, that are, if climate shows up in something. But it really bothered me to even suggest it, and we asked the attorneys and, they can't have real opinions, but the conversation that happened was because the bill itself never mentioned that word in particular, that it was all weather related incidents, that we should just protect the bill as best we could. But it was
Sure enough.
well, it was, because it's just like, you want to go, yeah, I'll fight, but it's not, I mean, if the administration is closing down wind farms in the ocean for better, for work. I mean, if they're just making decisions by fiat, then, this bill was creating something that still may not take flight because of the money. But until then, it's a great idea and it should exist. And to have the potential for it to be attacked was where we pulled back.
Just real quick. No, with that changes, I was 100% fine with it because climate is long-term, weather is what happens today. And today it's cold out there and the wind blowing and it sucks. And that's weather.
Yeah. But then I saw a thing that said how much percentage of January this year has the lake frozen over?
That was.
Yeah.
I saw that chart, it's like 0% in 2026 as opposed to 30% last year. And there's, it's been descending for years. It's like, I would have never thought of measuring anything
That was.
by how often it froze. Yeah. So,
Could I just ask a quick follow-up to your
Sure.
comment? I often wonder if, say, this committee finds whether, it's never happened, but say we find $1 million in the agency budget that we think isn't, good money spent. Or, or we look at the clean water fund and say, spend that better. How would approach say, well, you guys found the savings, you can spend it in your silo, because otherwise there's not much motivation for us to, root out that sort of stuff. If you just say, well, we're gonna, fill the transportation hole with that money you just saved. You see what I'm saying?
of course. And I'll answer, we found $1 million a few years ago on a housing issue that didn't happen. It stayed in, but the language had not been passed. And so the money was in the budget and we were able to quietly start a discussion about how to use that money and could we use it for another program that had legs. It took a lot to keep it separated from the pot. And there were plenty of people who fought against it, but that was a case of getting in people's grills a little bit and just not just going, that's my money, or that's my money to spend. I found the quarters in the couch, just like you asked. It can work sometimes, but I wouldn't wear a t-shirt.
Thank you, Representative Stevens.
Sure. No, thanks for having us.
We're gonna have tomorrow a little more conversation about this with JFO. I think it's tomorrow, right?
Yeah, I would, if you're going to learn from JFO, I would just ask them. There's no secret sauce in looking at spreadsheets. There's just not. But just understanding sometimes what you're looking for, of course, is the cream on the top. It's not how much they're paying for their computer systems or for healthcare benefits or anything like that. But I just ask them how best to look at it when you're trying to hold them accountable in terms of what's their programming, is it working? And just, learn whoever decides to get enthusiastic about it, and have somebody who knows how to look at the bottom lines and ask the questions about, is this necessary? Is this working? Does it still help people? Because sometimes there's programs, years ago, I was looking in the green books and we were working on minimum wage and I was just leafing through the rest of the compensation section. And there was a section in there about paying stay-at-home mothers. I was a stay-at-home father for more than a couple of years. And so I wasn't included in this old legislation, but it was from the early 90s. And it was a way to retrain them, because especially in the early 90s, if you took 5 years off from work, software changes such a great degree. I used to love WordPerfect. By the time I was going back into the workforce, it didn't exist. And so when I asked about the program, they were like, oh, well, that's not funded anymore. It's still in the books, but it's not funded anymore. There's no push button. It's not on anybody's desk anymore. So, that's there may be those kinds of appendixes in any department, and that you can find whether they have money or not. And it's like, no, it's just still there. It's just taking up room. So thank you.
All right.
Probably said too much, but I'll get a memo from leadership when I get there.
We appreciate it.
All right, thank you. And thank you for your work on all the stuff that you're doing. It's really important.
Thank you. All right. We are going to switch gears now. Have a little bit of conversation about a bill that is not our bill, but we've been asked to look at it. So the Environment Committee is putting together a miscellaneous bill that has, I don't know what all in it. But it has a section or maybe more that relates to CAFO and water quality. And the chair asked us to take a look. Tomorrow, we're going to have Ledge Council come in and actually look at the text of the bill. But in the meantime, we've invited some folks from the Agency of Natural Resources, so the parent agency for FTR, to spend some time with us. So Abby and Catherine.
Unfortunately, I'm Catherine
Yeah.
Guessing, General Counsel.
Hi, Catherine.
for the Agency of Natural Resources.
How are you, Catherine?
I'm good, how are you?
Great.
And unfortunately, Abby had a personal issue and couldn't make it today,
Okay.
so you're kind of stuck with me. She is the program sort of expert on CAFO, but I'll do the best I can. And if you have questions I can't answer, I'll make sure that I can get you the answers. Yes,
I'm on the stakeholder group,
yes.
so if you can't answer it, I'll answer it.
Okay.
And it will be true.
Yep.
Is there anything on our tablet?
Now, could we put,
It's 6:30, H6:32.
yeah, put it on for today?
You go into house environment.
And Catherine, I said that we wouldn't be looking at language. If you're welcome to put it up if you,
Okay.
that would be useful.
I want to do what's most helpful for you. There are two things that I could do. One is I could sort of walk through high level some of the changes in the bill by page and, line. Many of them are really just clarifications and don't necessarily result in any large changes. But there is one change that we've heard is of concern to folks. And so when we get to that, I can talk about that a little bit.
Just so that you know who we are, just quickly say hello. I think we've had you maybe remotely, but I'm not sure if you've been in person in the committee recently. Not this year anyway.
Not this year.
Yeah. Representative Bartholomew was not on the committee last year. He's, I think, joining us by Zoom, so you can't see him anyway at the moment. The rest of us, we're here. There he is, waving behind you. But you recognize him because he used to be on the Environment Committee. So
Okay, yeah.
we had met him there. And so why don't we just say hello? I'm David Durfee. I represent Shaftesbury and Sunderland and Glastonbury, Bennington County.
Richard Nelson, represent Derby.
Jed Lipsky, Memorial One Districts.
John O'Brien, Tunbridge and Rockton.
Okay. And I'm Catherine Guessing again, and I'm General Counsel for the Agency of Natural Resources. Maybe I'll start by giving you just a little bit of background about the CAFO program and the sort of rationale for kind of starting the whole process to change some of the statutes in ANR in Title 10. Some years ago, there was a petition from the Conservation Law Foundation, Vermont Natural Resources Council, and the Lake Champlain Committee that essentially alleged it was that EPA, it was directed to EPA, but it alleged that ANR did not have a sufficient CAFO program. And CAFO program is a concentrated animal feeding operation, and it's a program that is part of the Clean Water Act. It's a part of kind of the water quality focus of EPA. And as a part of that petition, the parties kind of got together and talked about how to resolve the issue. And we came up with a corrective action plan, which included a bill from last year, which was Act 67, which with the assistance of both the Environmental and the ag committees was successful. And we had also indicated that we may come back to the legislature with some additional changes based on our conversations with EPA. EPA did make some suggestions last year towards the end of the session on the bill that we promoted, Act 67. And so many of the changes that are in this H632 were suggestions from EPA technical staff. But I will say that I think EPA's position on this bill is that they sent us a letter saying they had no comments on it, but I also think that their position would be that it's really up to kind of the state to decide what is appropriate for the CAFO program at this time. The bill, the portions of the bill that relate to CAFO start on page 17. And as I said, most of these are pretty, they're really clarifications, or they're not necessarily substantive, but there are some that are substantive. So there's a couple of changes that are in Title 6 at the bottom of page 7.
Yeah, just trying to get it.
You want to put it up on the screen?
Is it okay if I see something, I throw a correction out?
Sure. Sure.
You know, minor things.
Sure.
I know we have some issues to talk about later, but on page 17, line 21, you know, you're talking about building a barn designed to hold more than 700 mature dairy cows, dairy animals, comma, 1,000 cattle or calf or cow or calf pairs. That should be cow calf pairs, maybe the backslash instead of an or.
Mhm.
But that's describing as a feedlot operation, and you have a cow and a calf.
Yeah.
So it's referred to technically cow calf pairs.
Why don't we hold off on,
Okay,
yeah, like that.
I will say that was a legislative council change. Yeah.
You haven't watched Yellow.
So, yeah.
And and the bill that we've got, so Patricia's posted this behind us here.
Yeah.
And when you used a page number there, I just want to be sure
It's different.
yeah, okay. I
Okay.
was wondering about that.
Battery or assault, huh? So H632, I'm in, let me see if I can narrow it down for you. I'm in section 14.
Section 14, okay.
Section 16, sorry, 16.
Page 17.
Page 17.
page 17.
Yeah, bottom of page.
Bottom of
Page 17.
Okay, here.
Good.
Yeah.
Line 19. Is that what you have, Richard?
Michelle.
This is just adding a large farm operation permit, and that change sort of goes along with the change on page 18, which is also on page 19, which specifies a national pollutant discharge elimination system. And the reason why I think EPA wanted that change is because they wanted clarity about which permit we're talking about, because they are different. Ag issues a discharge permit or a non-discharge permit, and the CAFO permit does allow for discharges, and it's called a NPDES permit.
This is adding the language,
Yeah.
national pollutant discharge elimination system,
Yep,
just to clarify.
just to clarify. And then on the previous page, the large farm operation, that's an ag permit. So it's just to clarify that that's what that is referring to.
Gotcha, okay. Representative Nelson?
No, that's perfect because that's part of the problem in the stakeholder group. People get confused when they say CAFO, CAFO, CAFO. And then ANR talks CAFO, but so CAFO, LFO, MFO right now are CAFOs under agriculture, non-discharge permits. And the NIPDES is the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, which allows a farm or could have a discharge. Which I still don't understand why we're allowed to have a discharge.
Richard, I now see that you were pointing out the cow-calf language is right there. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that we were looking at that same section. So we'll see if we can sort that out then. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then on page 19, line 21. There was a directive that the agency come up with a CAFO general permit. Right now, we have a medium CAFO general permit, and we were supposed to update that by December of 2025. And when I give you the overview of kind of what's happening in the program, I think you'll see why we haven't done that yet. The other thing is that we really would like to change the medium CAFO general permit so that it covers all farms as opposed to just one category of farms. The way that EPA and our own Department of Ag kind of quantify farms by large, medium, and small is by the number of animals that they have. And so while we have a medium farm permit already, a general farm permit already, what we're finding is that at this time, because the medium general farm permit doesn't include compliance schedules for farms to sort of come into compliance with some of the technical standards under the Clean Water Act, we want to change that permit so that it's more nimble, so that it can cover more people and that it will be more sort of user-friendly for the farms. So we asked for an extension to that. I will say that when we were before the committees last year, in the spring of 2025, we had one person in our CAFO program. We managed to hire another person in the late summer, and now we have 5 people, but 3 of those people have come on board in the last 3 months. So there's a lot of training and getting people up to speed because this is a complicated program, and we really want our staff to be out there and have the expertise that they need to advise people about, coming into compliance to work with farms. So that's one of the reasons why we haven't gotten to that thing yet. And in addition to that, when we first started talking about the corrective action plan and about the deadlines in the statute, we were not thinking about the stakeholder process, and the stakeholder process has been pretty time consuming. And it's really worthwhile. So I will say that. I don't know if you have a different take, Representative Nelson, but for us, we think it's been really worthwhile to talk with farmers, to understand what their questions are, to explore what other states are doing, things like that. So.
And it has. I just wish we didn't have to ask the same question
Over and over again.
every time we get together, because we get the same answer. Which is, we're supposed to get the same answer, the same question, but it seems like everybody has got to ask that same question. And sometimes 3 people in one day worded just a little bit different, and oh Lord. That's when Chair Durfee would say, Richard. And I'm starting to do that, Chair, in there.
Okay.
So the proposed change in that date is to September of 2027. So it's really pushing it out
It is pushing it out. Yeah.
quite a bit. And just,
It doesn't mean that we can't issue permits. We would issue an individual permit if we had to.
okay.
And we actually already have a draft of that. It's just we really need to go through a public process to engage both environmental groups and the farmers and other stakeholders in that process.
We would love to see a draft of that permit. Matter of fact, we asked for it today. Are you talking about creating? So the way I understand it, it's looking to be, see you later, Jared, take care. Is there would be two permits available.
Yep.
All right, and I'm gonna speak in the world of large farm. There's the non-discharge permit that we currently hold at large farm. CAFOs. And then there'll be a NIPD's permit if you have a discharge or if a farmer foresees he has issues, could request one.
Yes.
Are you talking about, you're not talking about creating one permit and that's what everybody's gonna have regardless of whether they have a discharge or not?
No, in our other program, we have other water quality programs like stormwater where we have general permits. And those permits are permits that have very sort of set requirements around best management practices. In this case, it would be agricultural, stormwater RIPs, those kinds of things. And also there would be language around what would be required in the production areas for containment of waste and things like that. So it would be kind of a cookie cutter permit. If somebody feels that they are already in compliance and they want the coverage, in case they do discharge in a severe storm event, they would have the permission, if you will, to discharge under those circumstances, then they can come in for that general permit. If they want if they need an individual permit to address something that's specific to the farm or a compliance schedule, then they could come in for that. And, we're sort of in the early stages at this point of building our program. And, we need our staff to do that. And like I said, we haven't really been fully staffed as yet. So we're making progress, but we're not going as fast as we'd like to, but it's a resource issue for us as well. And we really wanted to complete the stakeholder process so that could inform how we do business in Vermont. Yes, we have this box of, what we have to do under the federal regs, but, we want people to be engaged, to understand what's expected of them, and to give us input on how we're doing business. So the next one on page 20 is line 18. And this is the one that we've heard some concerns about. This is a section that talks about when the secretary can issue or require a CAFO permit for discharges. And this section says, it says or if the secretary determines in the secretary's discretion that as CAFO permit is required.
Period of A&R, this case.
Yeah. And so it's in Title 10. We've heard some concerns about that. We did notify House Environment that we would be amenable to having that struck from the bill. I think that it was a recommendation originally just because EPA and others just wanted to be sure that the secretary would have the authority to address any issues that may come up. And at this point, we kind of don't know what we don't know about what's going on out in the farm community. So, yeah, so we're amenable to changing that or striking it. And if that's a concern to the committee, we're okay with that.
If we could just scroll up there a couple of lines, Patricia, so that we see the start of the sentence in just a little H.
Yeah, is met, I think.
A large CAFO shall not be required to have a permit unless one of the following conditions is met.
Yeah.
That's just grammatical.
That's alleged counsel, grammatical.
Then we had listed, so the existing statute then from last year presumably lists these three conditions. And now we're adding possibly this number 4 down below.
Yeah.
Yeah, which just says, or the secretary can say so.
Yeah. One of the following is,
Representative Brick.
You were explaining this some, but I was trying to get a little bit more clarity on line 18, page 20.
mhm,
What was the-
line 18.
Yeah, secretary determines in the secretary's discretion that.
Yeah.
What was the rationale for having this in there in the first place? Is this it's looking to me, I mean, off at first glance that it has to do with, if for some, reason that everything else, all other, options were taken and weren't successful. Is that what kind of this, is this
So-
a scenario where we tried everything and nothing's
Right.
working, so we're gonna let the secretary make a decision?
Right, so 1, 2, and 3 really lay out specific situations where the secretary should require a permit under the Clean Water Act. And 4 gives the secretary discretion if those other 3 things are not met. And so I think when people look at that, the concern is there's no standards there, right? Like we don't really know what that means, right? My perspective was that we wouldn't exercise that kind of discretion unless we had engaged in rulemaking and had very specific requirements set forth in the rulemaking. But like I said, we're okay with this being struck if it's something, folks are really uncomfortable with. So,
Richard.
Yeah, thank you. Counselor, I think the concern is not today, not tomorrow.
Yeah.
Administrations change and secretaries change.
Yeah.
And that may be wherein lies the concern,
sure.
to be fair.
Yeah.
You can read this a couple different, the secretary's always had the discretionary authority to require a NICD's permit. In the case of a discharge, right now we're fighting over the word potential.
Yeah.
And potential is not a discharge. If you own 1 cow, that's a potential for a discharge. You want to get right down to it. 1 cow in a brook in your farm. So that's
Not a CAFO though.
what is it? 14 cow. Is it? If you had 15 goats in a brook running through your farm.
No, just kidding.
John.
Counselor, just the little I there, it's confusing when to me, when it says the secretary shall require a nutrient management plan.
Oh, yeah.
Which,
Okay.
which is part of RAPS, so it's sort of saying like A&R's requiring farmers in ag to do an ag rule.
Yeah, read it over.
So the Clean Water Act does require nutrient management plans, and it also requires that that the secretary notice permits and nutrient management plans with those permits, which is something I think that is of concern to farms. The plans that are noticed under the Clean Water Act have to be approved by the secretary. So if we are issuing an individual permit to a large farm operation, as part of the process of issuing that permit, we have to put that permit on public notice, and we have to put the nutrient management plan on public notice. And that before we do that, we have to look at the nutrient management plan and say, yeah, that meets all the requirements. Does that make it clearer for you? I mean, yes,
Yeah.
I think ag has, really tried to make their program very consistent with the federal requirements. So that's why it seems so familiar, right? But some of the language is there's a lot of crossover. So,
Right, because I'm still digging back in MOU land there.
Yeah.
And so
So,
farm LFOs, which are not gonna be alpha anymore, they're gonna be CAFOs, right?
well, no, we already are. That's the capable permit is the LFO. Right now, non-discharge.
Because there was the MOU.
Yeah. Because of the MOU. So our nutrient management plans are on file across the road,
Right,
because
because of the wraps.
of the wraps. They are foilable, but they're not generally out there for public view. I mean, you'd have to go in and have with a FOIA request. I believe that's how it is.
yeah.
Whereas this says the secretary will make them public.
And under the EPA,
And they answered that question today, and I can't remember the exact answer he gave, but for sure.
There is a a code of federal regulations.
Yes, there is. And if we had to get a NIPD's
Yep.
permit, they're absolutely public record.
Yeah.
Before we move off of H and adding number 4, I want to just be sure that we understand as a committee whether the Environment Committee has taken a position on including or not including number 4. So
I don't know if they have yet.
Okay.
Because I think we just notified them this morning.
Okay, that's new information
Yeah.
that it
Yeah.
might be okay from the agency's perspective, from your agency's
Yeah.
perspective to cut that.
Yeah, and we told them that as well.
Okay, and then just backing up again, this is all, we're having this because EPA had given us some feedback after last spring's legislation.
Last spring, yeah.
Yeah, and said, so this actually is their language or their suggestion.
It's the suggestion of the technical staff.
Okay,
I don't know if you'd get the same answer from EPA headquarters.
okay, all right.
It might be,
Reality of our new,
it might be outside of the Clean Water Act.
Okay,
So what? And they are going back to review that. If we asked them today.
well, we've asked them to do a number of things that they haven't done. But that's okay. I shouldn't say that.
That's fine. You should have been there today.
I was trying to catch up on stuff. So Kim, should we move to the next
Yeah.
page?
let's,
Okay,
Everything.
so that would be page 21.
yeah,
And it's line 5 and 6. Another sort of request, it's really just a clarification that permits shall be renewed in accordance to their terms. And that provision also gives farms an option to opt out if they're in compliance and they're no longer discharging. So I don't know that this is a huge substantive change, but
doesn't put any more burden
Yeah.
on farming.
no, it does not. The next change was on page 22. lines 1 through 10. And this is another change that I don't think is necessarily substantive. The language in 7 through 10 specifically tracks the federal language, the Code of Federal Regulations. There were just some minor differences with the language above it. And so it's, you know, it's a provision that basically says that if you have 2 or more farms that are owned by the same entity, you consider them, you know, in aggregate in order to determine whether they're a large farm operation or a medium farm operation. So
That's to prevent somebody from saying, well, these are
separate
They're the
farms,
same.
even though
I have 2
you
small
know,
farms.
they're both, but they're just across the road, you know, that kind of thing.
This doesn't change anything substantive. It's
No, it doesn't. And then under lines 14 to 16, whether milked or dry was a provision that was not included in the definitions of, you know, animal farm operations, concentrated animal. So that has been added to the provision regarding large farm operations. And the same with page 23, where we've taken the federal definition and just dropped it into our statute as opposed to relying on a provision that's in Title VI. So.
does Richard, any thoughts on that? Raise any flags for you?
No, milked or dry, that's good because you ask somebody how many cows they have and they might tell you how many they're milking. They might say, I'm milking 610. But their company in dry cows and Springers puts them at 800. You know.
Right, and these still.
If you ask me how many cows are milking, I'm gonna tell you it's 2,200 and that's all mature cows.
What's a Springer?
Springer is an animal that's ramping up, getting ready to give birth and milk, and their udders springing up with milk.
A bred heifer.
Really bred.
Really?
I mean, but there's bred heifers wouldn't count because they're not mature until they have their first calf.
Okay.
So, and I haven't read through this definition of large farm, but it looks about like it's absolutely cookie cutter from everything we've ever talked about, Chair.
That's in.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
100%.
And then on page 24, under 16 through 21, and then it goes on to, you know, 1 through 8 on page 25. It's the same thing where it's just medium farm operations that we're defining and adding whether milked or dry. So.
I have a question,
Sure.
if I may.
Go ahead, John. Yeah.
Yes. Just that last section you mentioned, that it mirrors, I think you said federal definition.
Yes.
So why wouldn't we just cite the federal regulation where that is, in case in the future that changed, we'd have to change state statute to keep it the same.
You could do that, and I can provide you with the CFR number if that's what your preference is. I think that would make sense too. If that's
I think
something that the committee.
Yeah, we had a conversation about this same choice last year, I believe, or maybe it was 2 years ago. And one thought that was brought forward was that if you don't want to have to go hunting down that federal regulation, or, it's maybe helpful to have the language here in statute as well.
Yeah.
The world that we're living in today, where it's so easy to type something in and now you can see what any federal regulation would be at your fingertips. Maybe that argument isn't quite as strong as it once was.
Yeah, I will say that the definition of farms hasn't changed. The definition of waters has changed a lot.
Yeah.
So over, just over the different administrations across the last couple of decades. So, I don't have a strong feeling one way or another. There's some utility in having it in the statute and having it, local, but we would have to change it if the feds changed it.
And before,
Yep.
in across the road statute, Title VI. And then they just, which follows the federal statute.
Just for, are there any MFOs that aren't CAFOs in EPA's world? Because it's a
No.
high number of livestock, so it seems like at the low end of an MFO, it doesn't seem like it rises to what the EPA thinks.
If you have 200 head, you are a case.
Really?
That's the 200.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're not required to have a Clean Water Act permit.
Unless you have a
Unless
discharge.
you have a discharge, right? And then there's a higher standard for small farms. You have to have a significant impact. So there's some specific language around that. I'm probably not quoting it exactly, but it is a higher standard.
Okay.
No, you are, and that baffles some of us as to why that is.
That's the federal standard, and I
Understand.
think it may be that when they initially adopted the rules regarding farms, that they were also considering economics, and small farms may have less, I wouldn't say they all have less, but they may have less capacity to put in the kind of, manure storage and things like that other farms might have. So that might be part of what the thinking was. I just don't know for sure. That's a federal question, All right. Okay, page 26, line 14, stormwater. I think that's a ledge council.
One word.
Correction, yeah, it's a typo correction. And then page 27, line 4, same thing, shall have, has the same meaning. I believe that's a ledge council correction. Page 28, 1 through 5. This was an addition to some of the secretary's authorities, the powers of this secretary. And it just makes it explicit that we need to establish technical standards that are consistent, at least with the federal CFRs around farm operations. Those sections specifically deal with production areas and buffers and other sort of technical standards under the CAFO rules, the federal CAFO rules. And then line 15, wastewaters, that's a typo correction. Page 30, line 7 and 8. Hopefully I'm not going too fast. This was just a clarification, that makes it clear that we're talking about the federal CAFO regulations. And page 31, which I'm hoping is the last thing. Lines 3 through 5. This is in the section that deals with environmental enforcement. And I think it was just an oversight last year that we didn't align the language around the MOU that's in the statute now with what's in the enforcement section. So
We did that.
Yeah.
A couple of other places, I guess.
yeah,
Not this
last
one.
year. Yeah. And this one was just an oversight. So that actually, I think, came from me, but, and with that, take any questions, and I could also just kind of give you an overview of the stakeholder process and some of the other developments.
We've been hearing just anecdotally from time to time from Representative Nelson when he goes to those meetings, but it would be nice to hear.
Sure.
Yeah, your position.
Yeah. So there have been 6 stakeholder meetings to date, and all of them have included farmers. Initially, we met with farmers and not some of the other stakeholders, but we have met with farmers and the other stakeholders. There have been a number of guests that have come to those stakeholder groups. We've had presentations from other states. EPA was there today. And we've also, as part of the stakeholder groups, we've included folks from NRCS and consultants who are really familiar with farm operations and go out and work with farms on their nutrient management plans and upgrading their manure systems and things like that. We are expecting to have, we've scheduled public informational meetings, 2 of them in February. So I think one is on the 9th and one is on the 11th. So we can get sort of public input on the process. And after that, we will be providing the legislature with just kind of an interim update. And then we're hoping to issue the stakeholder report, the more formal report with the details of where the stakeholders, what the stakeholders have sort of communicated to us in terms of how they would like the program to look. We're going to do that in March. So I think sometime in March, either hopefully.
Does the legislature need to act on that?
Well, unfortunately, our deadline was February 15th, but we're not going to make that deadline. So we're hoping to get something, to the legislature by mid-March, but it may be a little bit after that.
Other than receive it and thank you for sending it, though, is there legislation that needs to happen before something else can happen?
I don't know. I think that we really need to let the stakeholder process play out and let people, say what they think needs to happen. And then if there's consensus, then maybe there'll be something additional, but I don't know at this point. I really don't. Yeah. We have a corrective action plan that we submitted to EPA. And as part of that corrective action plan, we were required to do 10 inspections. We did those 10 inspections this past summer, 5 LFOs and 5 MFOs. We also went out during those inspections, our staff were kind of the lead. But we also went out with ag and with our enforcement folks when we had like complaints that people, specifically made to us. So we've done additional, inspections kind of as needed as they've come up. And yeah, I mean, I don't have a whole lot. I did talk to you a little bit about the staffing. We now have 5, which is great. and they're in the process of training. And we've got a couple of people who really know farms really well, but they need to convey their expertise to others. So we're in the process of doing that.
Does 5 bring you to full staffing level, or are you still recruiting?
I think we may come back at some point and ask for more staff or resources. I just don't know. I think in part it depends on the results of the inspections, and it's really early. The inspections that were done were, on farms that either EPA had identified as, priorities, or, there were complaints, or ag had identified as potential priorities. So, it may be that we're seeing, I don't want to call it the worst, but maybe that we're seeing the more problematic farms first, and not, so we need to have more boots on the ground before we really know how much we need. So that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
I was just wondering, how are those positions funded? Was that a new cost for A&R? Is it federal money that's paying for them?
It's a new cost. Yeah. Although we did get one position funded through the legislature last year, I believe. And then we took one position from another position within the watershed division. And then we were also given some money for contracting. Part of that money went to the contract for the facilitator for the stakeholder process, because I think it's really helpful to have a good facilitator, and so that staff can be fully engaged with folks and really participate. And some of that money, I think, we're using at least temporarily to fill that position. So, yeah.
Who's your facilitator?
Patrick from CBI.
Yeah.
I think his last name. He's excellent. He really gets documents out to us, summaries of, we'll have summaries of this meeting by the end of the week, and then, what we should be looking at handling next week. And I just wish we would quit handling the same thing every week.
Well, if do you have any suggestions about how to?
It's hard because ask Abby, she'll tell you. She's had to explain the same thing 5 times, 6 different ways.
Okay.
And we have.
It's new. It's new to.
We have 15 farmers in there, 3 technical service providers. One of the technical service providers used to work for ag, and there's some clashing of personalities there.
Mhm.
So I've been reaching outside the box, talking to people that are in the room, outside of the room, and saying, we gotta get this under control. Now, a week ago, we did meet with the advocates,
Mhm.
and that was productive. And we're meeting with them again next week, and I want to run the dry erase board and ask CLF and the Champlain Basin people, and what do you want? We'll write down, point, counterpoint. Where do we agree? Where do we disagree? Can we come to a compromise, or where we're going to agree to disagree? Let's get that done. EPA is gonna, or Abby and the group are gonna send to us again the charge from EPA.
Mhm.
So we know what EPA wants. And we should be able to finish up fairly quickly by making those 3 lists
Mhm.
and just drawing the lines, making the spider web and figure out where we need to be. It's so that's where we're at and it's just to stop the redundancy. Yeah, we have heard from Maine, we heard from New York, and some of the technical service providers work over in New York and they love New York's program. The big difference between New York's program and our program is A&R goes and does all the inspection, 100% of it.
Mm.
Ag is right behind them with a 10-wheeler load of money. And when they find a problem, they dump the money and they fix the problem. We don't have that luxury in this state. And that is part of the issue. And here, oh, I'm serious, guys. Here, we have to wait for the farm bill to come through. And the farm bill has been in limbo for 3 years now. And, before we have money to fix these problems, and that's part of one of the asks we're gonna have of the Agency of Natural Resources is, let's tap into some of this clean water money. And get more of it on the farms and we heard yesterday from Kate Longfield and the Champlain Valley Farmer Coalition, of which 2 of the members that are in that were here yesterday are in the stakeholder group. I wish Kate was. She was fantastic. And the citizens advocacy group that was in here, the CAC. And they spoke about farmers getting a source of funding to continue. We're at 83% of lowering TMDL with 25% of the money.
Yeah.
Well, if we got another 25% of the money, what more could we do? And so anyways, it's going, we're gaining. I'm sure it's as frustrating for Abby as it is for me. Misty's been great to work with. And we spoke about this today.
Yeah.
So.
Good.
I have an ask. Next week when we meet with the advocates, they're 2 out of the 3 are lawyers. We don't have a lawyer in the group. I asked if you and Council Collier could be with us. So if they ask some technical questions or something. And if we need to separate for a minute to seek advice from you and Attorney Collier. And it would really be of a help to us. And we value your input.
Okay. I will, I'll follow up on that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, we will have Michael Grady in tomorrow just to go through again and see if we have any questions and we can get some clarity on whether House Environment, where they are with that one particular piece, giving the A&R secretary, that additional authority.
Is Chair Sheldon away right now?
I'm not sure.
Yeah. And, we may have to wait
Okay, all right,
and out of respect.
okay. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Offline and